First, as you know, I returned early this morning, as it turns out, from Washington, D.C. Our second mission this month. This mission, we were fortunate to have along with us a significant business contingent or industry contingent from Saskatchewan, some of the very folks that are industry leaders in ensuring that Saskatchewan can provide the food, fuel, and fertilizer to over 160 countries that we do each and every year. And of course, the largest trading partner and our most trusted ally historically has been the United States of America, of which where we were engaging with not only a number of elected folks, but also industry partners that we have based out of Washington, D.C., as well as think tanks. And so I'd say thank you to those industry leaders that joined us on this most recent mission to really put forward Saskatchewan's case as to why Saskatchewan is an important value trading partner of the United States of America and how Saskatchewan can continue to play a role in food and not only energy security, but I would say energy dominance in North America. When it comes to tariffs, what we are doing as a province and will continue to do for the foreseeable future is to make every effort to head off any imposition, whether it be of tariffs coming from President Trump in the United States or whether it be even counter tariffs from Canada. Necessary, unfortunately, counter tariffs from Canada. No one wins with the imposition of tariffs. Certainly, if there is tariffs that are being charged on southern flowing products at the 49th parallel and on products coming to the north, no one wins in that environment. And I would say in particular, no North American family wins in that environment. It makes our economy, our continental economy, much less competitive. It hinders us in ensuring that not only do we have food security, continental food security, but it really hinders us as we strive to ensure that we're energy secure as well. And in the case of the U.S., their goal is actually to find their way to energy dominance. And so what we're facing in North America today and what the President is proposing is really three important dates that lie ahead of us. One very soon, March the 4th, there is the proposal of broad-based tariffs. These are focused around fentanyl and the border, ensuring that we are reducing or eradicating, in the case of Saskatchewan, fentanyl, and increasing the measures that we have at the border, of which Canada and the provinces have acted very quickly on. Second would be March 12th, would be the steel tariffs, steel and aluminum tariffs. And third would be April the 2nd with the proposal of reciprocal tariffs, which would be much more global in nature. So I'll just make a comment on each of those maybe at the forefront. First, when it comes to the March 4th tariffs, the fentanyl and border-related tariffs, Saskatchewan has acted very quickly with our border security plan. Been acting, I would say, even for a number of months and years now, with increasing the number of enforcement officers in our communities. Most recently was this past fall with the addition of 100 municipal officers as well as 185 provincially funded municipal officers and 185 provincially funded RCMP officers. We have a very two-step focused effort when it comes to fentanyl in Saskatchewan communities. The first is to provide recovery opportunities, and the second is to eradicate that poison from our communities. That's why the additional officers are being funded by the province. That's why you saw our Minister of Justice and police chief and other police chiefs supporting the initiatives that came forward just recently this last week in increasing the consequences for those that may be dealing this poison in our communities. And I would point to an investment that the province had made just a short while ago that is being recognized by the U.S. Department of Justice, and it has to do with our ballistics laboratory, which is based right here in Saskatoon, where they had sent a letter of appreciation to our chief firearms officer, Commissioner Robert Freeberg, and it says this: within a month of there was a firearm that I was actually did cross the border north into Canada. And it was recovered in Saskatchewan, and they were able to actually link it to an unsolved homicide in Atlanta, Georgia. And so a letter of appreciation from the U.S. Department of Justice for investments that are being made in Saskatchewan that are having an impact on solving unsolved, in this case, a homicide in Atlanta, Georgia. And so again, an example beyond the broader economy where our nations are working together and where Saskatchewan is supporting the broader community safety and family safety, not only in our communities in this province, but across our nation and across North America. The steel and aluminum tariffs, we would urge the federal government to look at all options that they might have in that space to alleviate those tariffs that are proposed to potentially come into effect on March the 12th. They need to ensure that there is not foreign steel that is flowing into a USMCA trade-free area. This was some of the steps that we took 5 years ago when there was steel and aluminum tariffs proposed, and we need to double down our efforts on ensuring that the USMCA trade area is for Canadian, Mexico, and U.S. built products. And last but not least are the reciprocal tariffs, and what we would urge and have urged the federal government as we find our way towards April 2nd. There will be a report that will be released to the President on April the 1st, and ultimately a decision on reciprocal tariffs. That this is more of a global view, we feel, by the U.S. administration, and we would hope that if every effort is made between now and then, that we might be able to find our way to a review of our USMCA agreement, of which is planned for the, I believe is scheduled for the 6-year mark to do a review of the USMCA. And so three tariffs to keep in mind. One is the March 4th date with the broad-based tariff efforts. Those are focused on fentanyl and border crossings, of which tremendous investment has been made. That is making our communities safer, making our borders safer, some provincial, some federal investment. March 12th is the steel and aluminum tariffs. There is an opportunity for our federal government to engage to protect the free trading continental opportunities that we have. And then last but not least is the proposed reciprocal tariffs, which are more global in nature, and the federal government, I would hope, and we would urge, would be into more of a review of USMCA at that point in time. No one wins in these instances where there is a broad-based tariff or tariff war, where we have tariffs going back and forth. So from Saskatchewan's perspective, what we are doing is, number one, is we are engaging like we have over the course of the last 15 years. We've been in the Washington, D.C. 2 to 3 times a year for many years, over a decade now. Been there twice this month, and we're going to continue to engage alongside our industry partners and engage alongside any allies in the effort to not have a tariff-free environment. We're making efforts right here at home to the degree that we can to eradicate fentanyl from our communities for the benefit of Saskatchewan families and Canadian families, not simply because it is a priority of the President. It is a priority of Saskatchewan people and Saskatchewan families. This poison needs to leave the province and the communities where we live. It will make our communities safer. Saskatchewan most certainly is a part of supporting not only food security, but the United States of America's quest for energy dominance with the products that we provide, over $15 billion of oil. We provide uranium for clean nuclear power. In fact, one in 17 homes in the U.S. is powered by Saskatchewan uranium. And most certainly during our time here, this most recent time and earlier this month, we had some good engagement with senators, with secretaries, with congressmen, as well as with many others on the periphery of the Washington, D.C. decision-making circle. So we would push our federal government at this point in time is to continue to engage, and we did bump into our Canadian appointed fentanyl czar alongside the ambassador, and I understand Minister McGuinty was engaging there as well, and we're encouraged by the presence of the ambassador having not only the minister but our fentanyl czar in Washington, D.C., making the case for the investments and the initiatives that our federal government has made, alongside us as Saskatchewan making the case that we're making at the provincial level. To alleviate that March 4th broad-based tariff threat that hangs over us. Then we will work on the steel and aluminum tariffs alongside the federal government, and ultimately I encourage everyone to get into a larger review of USMCA so that we can ensure we get back to the stable trading environment that we have enjoyed, and I hope we never take for granted. with the United States. Our focus from Saskatchewan's perspective is very much one of the long view. We want to find our way back to that stable trading environment where Saskatchewan can be part of building the continental food and energy security that we know we need as North Americans, as fellow North Americans. And if we are not focused on that, as someone that lives on this continent, you can trust and rest assured that others around the world may be, and they may be interested in it, not with our best interests in mind. And so energy security, food security, manufacturing security all have to be goals not only of us in the province and the nation, but they have to be our continental goals. And over the course of the next number of months, I hope we all keep that at the forefront and keep that as the goalposts on where we want to find ourselves. And that's the message we took to Washington, D.C. this week, and I'd say it was very well received. So, thank you.
Mr. Premier, who exactly did you meet with in the U.S., and do they have any influence at all on Donald Trump and the U.S. President's decisions on Canadian tariffs?
Yeah, I'd say the President, first of all, is pretty independent. I think we could all agree in the decisions that he makes. However, there certainly is a Congress and a Senate, and so this most recent visit was focused on a number of different congressmen and senators, and we'll get a list together of this visit and the last visit of all of the folks that we've met with. I don't have it handy with me at this point in time, but I provide an example or two. Senator Chuck Grassley, for example, is someone who has been quite outspoken with respect to what the cost would be to Midwestern American farmers should a 25% tariff apply to potash. We met with Senator Grassley. We've met with him a time or two before as well. A number of other senators and congressmen as well in the Ohio, the Illinois space, where we send a large amount of our crude oil, which is fueling refineries in communities in communities throughout the Midwest. And so I would say that, yes, the Senate and Congress, they most certainly do have a say, in particular as we find our way through time and get closer to the House elections, which already are just over a year and a half away. Second to that, we've met with a number of secretaries, Secretary Wright, Secretary Burgum, and in continuing to reach out and have some engagement in the works with some additional secretaries. So these are Trump appointees that are part of his President Trump appointees that are part of his cabinet. And I would say most certainly they do have some influence. One of the things, and I just as an aside, it's been very difficult to negotiate or push or find our way to a USMCA review when the individual that would be negotiating that from the U.S. side was just confirmed in the last day or two, and that's Jamieson Greer. Mr. Lutnick was just confirmed a few days prior to that, and those are the two individuals that you actually need to engage with on the other side. And so, with all of the, let's call it rhetoric that has come out of the White House and out of the administration, we haven't even had someone in place where the Canadian government or Minister LeBlanc can actually engage. Thankfully, he has been forming those relationships, and we'll support him in that work most certainly. Third to that, I would say there are a number of other, whether it be industry folks, various think tanks and whatnot, that I think also do have an influence, maybe if not directly, indirectly on some of the information and some of the decisions that are being made not only by the President, but also decisions ultimately that as we move forward are going to be made by the President's cabinet. It's been just over a month, a busy month. But there is a cabinet in place now, I think, which will be helpful for our federal government and folks like myself to engage with, and I think the other points of engagement matter as well. Everyone has a role in it, and that's why I think you saw us very open and actually working alongside what are globally leading industries in Saskatchewan, and we should never discount what it is we're doing here and how impactful it is to the world in providing that food and energy security. When you look at the products that we produce, whether it be potash, uranium, agri-food products, whether it be oil, which all goes to the United States in the case of the Saskatchewan produced oil, that we do have an impact. And not only in what we produce, but in how we produce it and how we provide it to allied nations around the world. And so, I'm not going to discount in any way that the President very much, he does make his own decisions, but I don't think we should also discount that he isn't listening to some of the folks that are around him. And we are very much trying to engage at every level that we can to ensure they realize the value if your goals are food and food security, energy dominance, there is certainly a value with having a free and open non-tariff trade with Canada, and specifically, I would say, with Saskatchewan.
About a day ago, you tweeted, effective immediately, all pipeline permits going east, west, and south received in Saskatchewan will be considered pre-approved. Considering environmental laws, regulations, First Nations consultations that need to be done, private landowners' rights, why did you tweet that?
To provide certainty. Provide certainty for an industry that is in a very uncertain time. For two reasons. One, the first reason would be some of the rhetoric that we hear coming from south of the border, and two would be because of almost a decade of detrimental policies that have come out of our own federal government, whether it be carbon taxation, whether it be the rewrite of pieces of legislation like Bill C-69. This is an industry that has repeatedly been faced with uncertainty by our Canadian federal government, and now also, and more recently, even over the last number of years, by the U.S. administration with the cancellation of projects like KXL. We need to come together. If we are truly serious about being independent as a nation and coming together and ensuring that Canada is energy secure and food secure and manufacturing secure into the future, that needs to be reflected in our policy development. And I would say that over the course of the last decade, that has not been the case. And so for us today to say, you know what, we need to have more access to Canadian energy across our nation. Well, all of the policies that have been developed in the last 9 years have not been focused on that in any way. In fact, the policies that have been developed have killed Energy East. They've killed the TMX or the Gateway Pipeline heading to the west coast. And I would say policies south of the border, or ideology south of the border, with the previous president, killed the KXL pipeline. And so we need, all of those projects to maybe not come back, but like wise projects, they need to be part of the discussion if we're truly serious about creating an energy secure nation, and if there's any chance of energy dominance across North America, which is the new U.S. administration's goal. All of our policies need to be about creating certainty for these industries that are going to ultimately do that for us. And I would say that we've dropped the ball on that the last 9 years at the federal level. So it's about creating certainty. It's not about circumventing in any way all of the requirements that industry and companies would have moving forward. Those requirements would certainly still stand. But it certainly is a nod, and I would ask other subnational leaders in the federal government to join us in doing what we can do to provide certainty to all of the energy industry, not just the oil and gas industry, but all of the energy industry that we want you to develop in Canada. We want you to develop across North America so that we can provide that continental energy security now and into the future.
Just to follow up on that, doesn't the pre-approval overlook the environmental assessments and duty to consult?
No.
How do those fit into it?
All of those criteria certainly are still in place. However, the pre-approval provides certainty to the industry that we are in Saskatchewan going to ensure that you can bring a project from its very pre-development stages through development and ultimately into a producing project, whether that's a mine site, whether that's a pipeline, whether that's an investment in the energy industry. And this is where Saskatchewan very much differs from some of the policy initiatives that have come out of our federal government over the last number of years. When you look at Energy East, for example, yeah, there was a proponent that backed away from that because Bill C-69 came into place, and the proponent was informed by the federal government that not only are you responsible for your direct emissions, but you're going to be responsible for every emission that's ever in any way related to the product that's flowing through this. And so that's ridiculous. There's no criteria like that anywhere in the world. It's a deliberate policy that's put forward to make our nation less energy secure, and I would encourage Canadians to remember that as we find our way to the ballot box nationally over the course of the next year. We have a federal Liberal government that has put our nation in a very tenuous position by enacting policies that are not focused on taking care of Canadians when it comes to ensuring we're energy secure, and I would say in turn are starting to threaten through inflation some of the food security and other quality of life standards that really have been the hallmark of what it means to be a strong and free nation, and really have been the hallmark of what it means to be Canadian.
In your conversation with the Prime Minister earlier this week, did he give any indication as if there's a path to avoid the tariffs on March 4th?
I believe there is a path to avoid these tariffs on March the 4th. And as we talked earlier, the President does, make decisions with the information that he's provided. But at the end of the day, they are his decisions. And we did see a 30-day reprieve just about 30 days ago. And I would say, and this is why I was heartened to see the fentanyl czar alongside the Minister of Justice federally in the Washington, D.C. market, because we need to make the case. And ensure that everyone is informed, and I can tell you they're not all. Many are, but not all, are informed of the investments that, yes, our federal government has made, but also informed of the investments that provincial governments have made as well. The federal government investment in Black Hawk helicopters, in North American drones, in 10,000 folks, 10,000 law enforcement officials available at the border. Those are necessary investments, and they need to be communicated to our largest trading partner because they're a priority for them. We as well have made investments in eradicating fentanyl from Saskatchewan communities, with increasing the consequences for those that are dealing fentanyl in our Saskatchewan communities as recent as this week, right here in the city of Saskatoon. And in addition to that, you look at the investment that we've made in about 300 additional police officers in the last 6 months, and the Saskatchewan Ballistics Laboratory, which is having an impact far beyond our Saskatchewan communities in ensuring that we're identifying, in this case, a firearm that had crossed the border to the north, came into Canada, that was used in a homicide in Atlanta, Georgia. And so, a letter of appreciation from the U.S. Department of Justice. And so, more to do, I think. And as long as there is, in this case, fentanyl or crystal meth that is present in Saskatchewan communities, we're going to remain very vigilant in providing, one, recovery opportunities, but two, every tool for our enforcement arms, our enforcement agencies, and our officers that are on the street to remove that poison from the communities and get it out of the hands of the people that are putting it into the hands of our friends and family members. That is very much what we will be focused on. That in itself, and communicating that to our U.S. partners will help us as we head towards the March 4th date. The March 12th date, we need to look at protecting our free trade area, the USMCA, our continental free trade area, whether it be auto parts that might be coming in from another nation, or whether it be steel and aluminum that might be coming in, to ensure that all three partners, whether it be Mexico, U.S., or Canada, can rest assured that there is not products that are coming in that may be built somewhere else and being absorbed into that free trade agreement that we are, we cherish and value. Because with that free trade agreement, we're able to use the words like it being energy secure and being food secure. And then last but not least, with any agreement, 6 years of water under the bridge with respect to the USMCA agreement, there is a planned review. And for the broader, more, I'd say, global initiative that I see coming out of the Trump administration on reciprocal tariffs, I would hope that we could find our way, and we should be preparing as a nation to enter into that broader USMCA review.
On March 4th, if the tariffs do come in, are you able to say what impacts people living in Saskatchewan might observe right away?
Well, the very first impacts will be observed by an American family that's filling up their vehicle at the pumps. Second, they'll notice it at the grocery store, because that very fuel is used to get the products to the grocery store. Third, I would say you're going to see, from Saskatchewan's perspective, U.S. ag producers are going to notice, with a 25% bump in the cost of their potash fertilizer. 90% of potash from Saskatchewan 90% of potash that is used by American farmers comes from the province of Saskatchewan for very obvious reasons, not just geographical reasons, but we are an allied nation. And it's very difficult to, one, get potash from another area into the Midwest, and two, the next area you'd be looking at would be Russia. And so Saskatchewan, I would hope we can all agree, is a much more valued trading partner for the U.S. Midwest farmer than a country like Russia. And so those are a couple of examples of what the American families and American producers are going to see. You will see, I think, also, in addition to those inflationary charges for families and businesses, you'll see, if not immediate, very, very quickly, some repositioning of industries in the way of job loss. You know, our steel and aluminum industry in Canada is very, very sensitive to a tariff like this on southbound products, and I would say either way. In the case of the steel that we produce in Saskatchewan, it crosses the border a number of times before it's ultimately put into pipe and sold to a pipeline company to bring energy to Canadians and North Americans. So you will see some challenging labor situations, I think, at U.S. refineries. You'll see them in the steel and aluminum industries on both sides of the border, as well as, I suppose, you know, a number of other industries as well. We saw, you know, my colleague Tim Houston talking about, you know, some of the challenges that the tire industry is having as they have some manufacturing plants in Nova Scotia. So each area will have and can speak to a little different sector of the economy. Premier Ford, newly elected Premier Ford, I might add, with a third straight majority, and my congratulations to Premier Ford and the Ontario Conservatives. You know, you will see folks like Premier Ford speaking, you know, much more to the manufacturing sector, as well as those in Quebec, maybe into the aviation sector and whatnot. And that's some of the strength we bring. And as you know, a couple of weeks ago, all 13 premiers were in Washington, D.C. That is, you know, we are diverse in our opinions and diverse in our politics as well. But the strength of Canada is that we as 13 premiers can very well represent, you know, the broad base from an economic perspective, how we create wealth in this nation. And that's what we were trying to do a couple of weeks ago in D.C. is to provide and remind our trading partner of that value proposition. So one, you're going to see inflationary moves at the fueling station, at the grocery store for U.S. families first. You will see, I think, some job loss and in certain industries, in select industries, and that'll likely show up on both sides of the border. So again, I would say our focus should always be averting tariffs, whether they be tariffs imposed by President Trump or even counter tariffs by our national government. They are not good for any North American family. In fact, I'd say they're hurtful to all North American families. Who they're good for are families and governments in other areas of the world, and not all of them may be our allies.
Just to follow up as well,
Yep.
Cameco and Nutrien have both reiterated what you said, that consumers will be paying for any additional tariffs, at least for their products. Have you, I take it you brought that up with people you met with, and are you able to talk to the response you got when you kind of that was mentioned?
Well, there is an understanding. There is an understanding, and listen, when you look at it through many in the U.S. eyes, they understand that they have a war on drugs in the U.S. Many of them don't know that we're facing that very same war on drugs north of the border. When you look at the challenge that we have, and I'd say it's a North American-wide challenge, the rate of overdoses from poison like fentanyl are very similar in Canadian cities versus U.S. cities. And so I would say this is an effort that we need to approach together. And I think we are. Despite the political rhetoric and the linking to tariffs, I think we very much are approaching you know, how we can eradicate, in the case of Saskatchewan, fentanyl from our communities in a much more aggressive and ambitious way than maybe we were 6 months ago. And we need to continue with that effort long into the future for whatever might be you know, might be present in our communities. So yeah, I would say there is an understanding, but this is why we're there, is to have that dialogue and to ensure they're well aware of what we're doing in the case of, you know, each of these three dates, what we're doing in the way of keeping our communities safe and eradicating fentanyl from Saskatchewan, which is good for our American neighbors. The challenges and the opportunities that we have to protect our USMCA free trade zone, in particular when it comes to steel and aluminum, and I would add auto parts to that as well. And we had some engagement in our time a couple of weeks ago in Mexico on some of the initiatives Mexico is looking at in that space, and then largely get us to that broader USMCA review sooner rather than later. That will give us to that stable trading relationship that we have enjoyed. I hope we never take for granted as Canadians the value of that trading relationship with a country like the U.S. and a country like Mexico, and I hope they never take for granted what Canada and I would say Saskatchewan has to add to that continental energy and food security conversation. And so there is a path forward here. and it is a path. I'm not going to say we're going to alleviate tariffs or we're going to actually avert tariffs, but our goal is to do that. And then our secondary goal is if we do have tariffs imposed, is to have them lifted as quickly as possible and to use whatever tools we can, including engagement and including diplomacy, to have that happen.
Should those tariffs be imposed, what's your position on Saskatchewan immediately imposing retaliatory tariffs?
It should not be our goal. And there will be decisions that will have to be made, should this be the case, and I'm very hesitant about hypothetical what-ifs. But there will have to be decisions that may be made as we find our way through this conversation. And those decisions will be made as we find our way through this conversation. And I don't know that musing about what if or what should or what could be done are actually helpful in finding our way to the goal, which I hope everybody's goal is a non-tariff free trading environment or a fair trading environment with our largest trading partner. That's the motive and the target and the effort that we're engaging on today. We understand there may be some choppy water and some difficult decisions as we find our way through this discussion over the next number of days, weeks, and hopefully not too many months, but we're committed to being part of that discussion.
You mentioned a couple of times now that other countries may not have our best interests in mind. In that context, I guess, just how damaging would it be to lose the U.S. as an ally and a trusted trading partner?
Well, the damage is actually in the lack of competitiveness of the North American economy. And the fact that North American families are going to pay more for virtually everything they do in their life, whether it's be going to the gas station, whether it be going to the grocery store, whether it be whatever they might do. And so that is the challenge, is this is going to push up inflationary pressures on families. It's also going to push up those very same inflationary pressures on industries that are creating jobs for families. And so as a family, wherever you are in North America, any prolonged broad-based tariff imposition is going to cost you more in everything you do. Two, the ultimate cost might be your job, because industries will shift investment out of North America. And so that's the threat. That's the threat of not having this continental focus on energy security, competitive production, and providing energy to everyone that lives in North America. That's the threat of not having this continental focus on providing North Americans with food security and manufacturing security. And so, more broadly, and to rise up, the tariff discussion over a short period of time can be used as a lever, I suppose, to change some of the chess pieces in a trade agreement. But any broad-based tariff for any length of time, either way, is very, very harmful to the competitiveness of the North American economy and to the inflationary aspects of what each of us are living with. That's the threat.
So, Mr. Premier, given what you're saying about the potential impact of these tariffs, the provincial budget is coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Alberta has $11 billion set aside for its population to help ease the potential effects of those tariffs. Is there going
Was it 11 or 2?
I believe it was
Anyway,
11.
it was some.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any movement or change in the provincial budget or any relief for people in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, so we're formulating our provincial budget right now in what is a non-tariff environment, and we hope to keep it that way. And as I said, if tariffs do come into place, we hope they're removed sooner rather than later. However, there is an annualized cost if tariffs are in place for a long period of time, and that cost is great. And so, but we are formulating our budget today with every effort to balance the budget, as we always do, and formulating that budget in an environment that does not have tariffs. I think New Brunswick and Alberta have introduced budgets with some contingency lines in them that they say they would be able to rely on if they were to have to step in some way to support industries in a prolonged tariff environment or something of that nature. We're very much aware that might be a conversation that Saskatchewan has to have. However, when you look at each of those budgets, they're deficit budgets, and so any of that conversation would be into deficit spending in many cases, and I won't preclude what our provincial budget is going to look like on March the 19th, but I will say that we're making every effort and have made every effort to ensure that Saskatchewan is in a very sound economic space, and we've That is not an effort of the last year. That is an effort over the last number of years, so that we do have the fiscal capacity to support industries should we get into a prolonged tariff war. And a prolonged tariff war, if we find ourselves in a prolonged tariff war, U.S. tariffs being imposed and counter tariffs being imposed, that is very, very disastrous for the North American economy and for all North American families. And so it can't be our goal. It can't be our focus. Our focus needs to be returning to a competitive, fair trade environment where we can provide that energy security and that food security. And so I'm not going to preclude, whether we'll have a contingency line or anything in our budget, but I would say that I think, and this is through our weekly calls that we're having, that all provincial governments are not maybe actively looking at, but are fully aware that there may have to be conversations if we find ourselves in this, prolonged tariff environment. But again, I would say, and I hope that all of our provincial colleagues would agree with that isn't the goal. The goal is to engage and not have that imposed on us. Yeah.
Trump's administration has complained about sales taxes in other countries. Cabinet members and other advisors have discussed there being reciprocal tariffs based on countries that have those taxes in place.
Yeah.
Would Saskatchewan look at removing or reducing the PST and get the U.S. to follow through?
Yeah, I haven't heard the provincial sales taxes be raised, but I have heard the GST. And more pertinently, I think this gets into that third date that I had mentioned, where the reciprocal tariffs are more of a global view of the Trump administration. Now, Canada would be part of that global view, and I would hope that we're into a USMCA review at that point in time, so those conversations are somewhat separate from the Canada-Mexico scenario. But VAT taxes, value-added taxes, have been identified. I've heard of the GST. I have not heard of any provincial sales tax being identified in that. And I think when you look globally, in particular into maybe some of the European countries and whatnot, the value-added taxes are much more significant than what the North American value-added taxes might be. And we, quite honestly, you look at a number of states throughout the U.S. that have their own, version of what would be a state tax, which would be equivalent to a PST. So I haven't heard the PST linked to that value-added tax statement in any way. A little bit about the GST, but I would hope, and if we were in a USMCA review, we would have details on this that might be more of a focus in some areas of the world where maybe they have a 15 to 20 or 25% value-added tax. But again, it is now that we have Secretary Greer, Secretary Lutnick have been appointed, we actually have someone for, Minister LeBlanc, Minister Joly to actually have these discussions with, and that'll be helpful. And I would say maybe much more helpful than having them on Twitter or whatever the other ones are.
A Supreme Court of Canada ruling just came down within the hour, allowing the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan to proceed with challenging uranium exploration permits based on the government's alleged failure to consult. How does this impact the fast tracking of natural resource projects in Saskatchewan?
Who said failure to consult the Supreme Court?
I think Métis Nation of Saskatchewan.
Okay, well that would be different than the Supreme Court. There is a consultation framework that has been in place for quite some time. That being said, consultation very much is part of the success, I think, of the communities, in particular those communities that are doing business in an area, industrial businesses that are doing business in an area where it will have an impact not just on an Indigenous community, but on any community. And so I think we've come a long way over the course of the last number of years, and industries have came a long way as well, not only in consulting, but in charting out and mapping what the future looks like for that industry in that area. And I would point, for example, to an OSB plant that was proposed to be built in Prince Albert. It has a significant Indigenous ownership content. There's a number of Indigenous communities that are actually owners in the capital investment, and that didn't happen 25 years ago, and it's happening today, and it's happening because of early engagement and early discussions at the urging of the government that industries are having with Indigenous communities, but I would say more broadly all communities. We see something similar in the way of Indigenous procurement by BHP in the entirety of the potash industry, but BHP with the construction of their mine. But there's also a lot of discussions and consultation that's going on with the community of Jansen that is going to change markedly with a $20 billion investment on their doorstep, even extending out to other communities, even larger communities like Humboldt. And so the engagement needs to happen, and there is a required engagement that needs to happen with Indigenous communities and Indigenous people. I think we've come a long way in that space. But there's always more work to do. So we commit to doing that and working alongside President McCollum, whom I talk to often. And I think this is specific to the exploration. But without exploration, you don't have the broader opportunities of bringing wealth-creating industries into not only communities across the province, but I would say in particular into our northern communities. And many of them have provided very much in the way of employment and opportunity for northern residents.
I just wanted to follow up on the tweet about the pre-approval for the pipelines again. Does the National Energy Board not have the final say on whether pipelines are approved or not approved? So does it even matter if they are pre-approved?
Well, herein lies one of the flaws in Bill C-69 and the federal legislation that was put forward, is it actually is a political final say by the government and the cabinet. And we saw that that final say actually turf the Energy East investment. We saw, that final say is, we saw federal ministers and the Prime Minister talk about, things like no business case for the Gateway Pipeline heading out to the West Coast. Well, I can assure you, we certainly wish we had access to that pipeline today, and those in Eastern Canada certainly wish they had access to the Energy East infrastructure today. And so, quite the contrary. The final say is a very political say through Bill C-69 with the federal government. And that is what the tweet is about, is providing certainty and taking politics out of the decision-making process, where what we've seen over the last 9 years is a federal government that has constantly injected their ideology and their politics into those decision-making processes. And that just isn't right. And Canadians are realizing that today.
Does Saskatchewan plan to sign on to the federal nutrition program?
We're looking at that right now, working through that not only with the federal government, but working through some of the the opportunities and challenges with our neighbors, our colleagues, the other provinces and territories across the province. So our education minister will have more to say there in the days ahead. Always looking with the programs that come forward from the federal government as to what happens at the 5-year mark. Often these are 3 or 5 year programs, and then the funding isn't replenished.
I have one final question for you about
Yep.
the province's SIMP program and pausing intake for that program
Right.
in this province. So what do you think the cuts to the immigration numbers will be for the economy and for jobs?
Yeah, my understanding is the federal government has cut the numbers by 50%, and our provincial program has just paused it temporarily to, figure out how they're going to chart a path forward with half the allocation that we've traditionally had. It's been an important program for communities and for industries in Saskatchewan. So the provincial immigration department is just pausing the program temporarily so that they can chart a path on how they're going to work with a limited number of placements moving forward. The federal government, I think, is looking at all of the streams that they have and the allocations that they have, whether it be the student visa stream, whether it be the temporary foreign worker, the SIMP, or even the refugee stream would be a little bit different. There is another stream that was somewhat separate. I believe it was called the Kiewit stream, but it was for our Ukrainian refugees, essentially, that were never classified as refugees coming into Saskatchewan and Canada. I think there's a little over 8,000 that are in Saskatchewan, and their term of their application is coming up. And I think the federal government, I've been informed, are working on that, but that needs to be a priority in the short term. But what we're seeing in the case of the SIMP is just taking a pause at the provincial level to kind of rechart how we're going to move forward with half the allocation that the federal government has provided us with.